Hello, everyone. So, this is an interesting double or triple whammy. I am doing this technologically advanced. It's not technologically advanced. It's a multitasking advanced thing of broadcasting this to my Facebook profile, also on my Instagram live, and I'm recording this, and I'm going to be doing something with the recording. Um, so I worry that I hope I haven't taken. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm laughing. It's I'm laughing because it's like my brain is now going, three things I'm thinking of. Like I'm basically I feel like I'm speaking to three different audiences here. So my brain is just doing all sorts of gymnastics and now I'm having a freak out moment. Like, oh crap, did I bite off more than I can chew? But I'm gonna give this a go. Um God. And it's also the hilarious, not funny thing is figuring out which camera to look in. I've got my webcam up here. I've got my phone here, and I've got to make sure I speak into my microphone. These are just tech things I'm thinking aloud in my head. Anyway, hello everyone. If you're joining me live on whatever platform you're joining me on, also if you're going to leave any live comments, I don't think I'm going to be able to respond to them at the moment, just because my brain is at the moment trying to compute three different things at once. If I respond to any of your comments live, consider it a wonderful bonus, and I will try and respond to them afterwards, after the recording. And I'm also going to endeavor to keep my voice fairly level. So I've got my little snowball microphone here. And something I've noticed often when I'm really either really passionate or really in flow when I'm talking, my voice goes really, really quiet. And also because I tend to move around a lot when I'm speaking. So whenever I'm listening to recordings of myself speaking, I suddenly go really quiet and I pull myself away from my microphone. These are just my own little criticisms. Anyway, I'm really glad that you are joining me. Do let me know in whatever comment capacity where you are in the world. And I will either try and read it out or I'll just look at it and be very grateful that you're joining me live or on whatever recording platform you're watching this or listening to this. So it does feel feels really vulnerable to be sharing this. Because I'm broadcasting this partly to my Facebook profile, in which I have friends and family that have known me for years. And also, I'm going to be uploading this to various other platforms. So it's an interesting, it is a vulnerability thing, which in many ways, especially when I'm talking about shame and shamelessness, it means that I am very much walking this path myself as well. A lot of people can get this impression of me, maybe because I give that impression that I am very much, I give fucks about sex and talking about sexuality. And actually, I still do, because even though I'm a sexologist and I'm trained in this, I still live in the world that we live in. And from time to time, there are times even when I get tripped up on like, oh God, is this appropriate to say it here? What if my auntie listens to this, or my cousins, or people I grew up with, or people I went to church with growing up? So there's kind of being really honest with you that I find I experience shame when I'm sharing this stuff as well. So I hope this normalizes, and I know that vulnerability can be a really connecting human thing. And one of the reasons I wanted to share this is I know that human stories are what connect us. And it's very easy to sometimes want to be professional and all of the things. And I am mostly professional, even though whatever we define as professional is bloody arbitrary anyway. And yet also, I'm mindful that I don't want to platform a lot of my own story all the time. So I'm in this kind of wonky middle ground. But maybe you are familiar with some of my story, maybe you're not. Whenever people ask me how I became a sex coach and a sexologist, I always say, do you want the long story or the short story? Because there really is a very long story. And I wanted to share this with you watching or listening to give the human behind the camera, show that I'm a real human being and that in whatever capacity you have met me, maybe this is the first time you've ever seen my face, heard my voice on the internet. Hi. Maybe you've known me for years. Maybe you're one of my oldest friends where there's pictures of us at my second birthday party. And you can never know a person completely because humans are multifaceted. I hope that this gives you some insight as to why I do the work I do and why there are so many things that I'm passionate about. So I'm going to not backtrack, I'm going to go backwards a bit. Another reason that I share this is that a lot of people can get misconceptions that because I'm a sex coach and a sexologist, my life must be on a bed of roses and orgasms, where I was always sexually confident, always confident in my body, always talking about it, and or that in my current relationship life, in my marriage, or that my general sex and relationship preferences must be extreme. Like I had a friend years ago when I was first getting into sex coaching, being like, yeah, Lucy, you're really kinky. And I'm like, I mean, this is personal disclosure, I'm not particularly kinky. And I know this because I have loads of awesome friends and colleagues who are very into kink. And so it was a bit frustrating for me to hear him say that because it's like, nah, mate, I know what kink is, and that's not really me. And so it's kind of weird. It's a weird juxtaposition. So I'm going to start mainly from the beginning. So as you can tell, I'm British. I have a very sexy British accent. I was born in London in the late 80s, grew up in London, 90s and noughties. And I grew up in a very middle-class family, and pretty much everyone in my family on both sides, more or less, are quite religious, quite church-going. So I grew up going to church every Sunday. Both of my parents are very religious, Church of England. And something I do say to their credit, my parents are not the shoving it down your face, you're going to hell kind of religious. And at the same time, let me go through this. So I was a teenager in the noughties in London. And usually when you were a teenager going to church, certainly at that time, and I think it was now as well, I got very involved in the evangelical movement. And what I didn't know then, which I know now, is the evangelical movement, their marketing is sheer hot. They have very good marketing. They know their target audience. And I didn't realize just how much money is behind it. And so evangelicalism particularly appeals to teenagers, partly because it's very binary, black and white thinking, which when you're a teenager and a young person, you're much more prone to having. Also, their marketing, it was cool. Like they were hip, they were cool. That, modern contemporary Christian music is good, more or less. Like it's good. And still getting over a cough. And so I'm the kind of person where I've always been very much an all or nothing kind of person. So if I'm into something, I'm into it 100% with knobs on. And one thing I'm grateful for about Christianity is that it gave me that spiritual connection. It gave me this awe of the divine. It gave me this connection, which I'm really grateful for. And of course, being a teenager, being involved in evangelicalism, I got a big, massive splash of purity culture. And some of you may be familiar with purity culture, some of you aren't. Purity culture, certainly within the evangelical and Christian sense, if you look at the history of purity culture, it's very interesting. It started, I think, just after the 60s as a kind of counter movement to the sexual revolution of the 60s. And it's very much focused on quote unquote sexual purity. So if I think of that in real time, it was at Sunday school, in youth group. In my high school, I was very much part of my high school Christian group. It was many talks. I've lost count. It was constant talks about sexual purity and sexual morality. And I certainly remember feeling a sense of superiority as a teenager. And I regret that now, because I went to high school in London in the noughties. And if you went to high school, hi, do get in touch. And I regret this now, that I certainly felt a sense of superiority looking at other girls, because of course purity culture is much more focused on girls' behavior than boys. Looking at other girls who were being sexually active and being like, I'm pure. And I really regret this. And yet this is what we were kind of taught. Either that, I remember also as a teenager, I was very much involved. Like my whole social life was Christian. And, going to things like Spring Harvest, Soul Survivor, Soul in the City. And I remember like sermons and talks around why it's easier to pull somebody down into sin than to pull someone up. So I really got it. I got a massive dose of it. And you don't really realize how much it's affected you until you decide to start to leave it. But I do remember, even as a teenager, having a really high libido, feeling really horny. And of course, because of purity culture, feeling incredibly embarrassed and ashamed of it. I remember going through periods where I'd have really strong sexual fantasies, or I remember like sitting next to a boy at a Christian camp, and he had his top off because it was the summer, and feeling this like, and feeling really confused about that. And also, if you've ever been a Christian teenager or involved in Christianity as a teenager, you know the absolute confusion where everybody, all teenagers, you're pumped full of hormones. Everyone is horny, and yet we're not supposed to. So there's this kind of, we're horny, but we're not supposed to, but people are kissing and making out anyway. And the hilarious thing, the joke was, you learn the dirtiest jokes at Christian camp, which is absolutely true. I learned some brilliant jokes there. So there's this real confusion, because like you're in your Christian camps. I went to Christian camp as well. You're in your seminars, you're in your prayer groups, your study groups, and you're hearing so much about sexual morality and sexual purity and all of this, as well as other things as well. It wasn't all about sexuality. I do want to give that credit. But you're hearing all of this stuff about being godly and putting Jesus first. And there's this thing of, yep, I want to do this. Yep, want to do this. Then as soon as you leave the worship room, and then feeling guilty for that. And this feeling like you're having to live a double life in some ways. Or maybe you are somebody like me who prided herself on being a good Christian girl. And so feeling really uncomfortable, feeling really ashamed that I had these strong fantasies. I was getting turned on by things. Like I remember every time a sex scene came on TV, in a film, feeling so turned on by it, and then being like, what is wrong with me? Am I a pervert? I must be a pervert. There's something, I must be God. I couldn't say gosh. It was that real feeling of confusion and all of that stuff. So I can't talk about my own story without also talking about my health, because how and why I did this work is very intricately tied into my health, and my health collapsing when I was 14 with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and then years of relapse, recovery, building my health up again. And it's very intertwined with the Christianity, with healing, with sexuality, because yeah, it's quite emotional. I don't want to go too far deeply into it because I have been over it so many times in having had years of therapy, years of trauma work. And I'm aware that as I say this, I don't want to re-traumatize and reactivate myself because that ain't going to help me. And it's not going to get me anywhere. And it's not going to serve you if I'm re-triggering and re-traumatizing myself on a live stream or in a video. But I will say it was a really horrible, awful time. If you've ever had your health completely collapse on you, I was bedridden for a long time. I was in and out of hospitals and care homes. And of course, if you are a Christian at that time, that's going to cause a massive crisis of faith. And that was really making me struggle with my faith. And I'm very lucky in that my mum was always like, if you're angry at God, show God you're angry, yell at God, be angry at God, which I'm really grateful for. And in that time, I was also looking into different healing and recovery resources. And one thing that was very difficult was, I'm just going to adjust myself here, was very, very difficult, was I remember I was at Soul in the City. It was 2003, 2004. And I'd had ME for about a year and it was still pretty mild then. And I remember I was at an inspiring talk and this pastor saying, when you're really exhausted, that's where you end and where God begins. And I remember feeling really inspired and being like, yep, God, keep me ill for as long as possible because I want to know where I end and where you begin. And also there's a lot of talk in my time about being healed, by having a faith healing, by being healed by God. So there was a lot of that going on as well. And I very much felt this conflict of, should I be trying to get better or should I wait for God to heal me? Yeah, that mate, if you're not from a faith background, maybe you can relate to how absolutely fucked up that is, that mentality. But that was what I felt, and certainly some of the Christianity that I was exposed to. Because even though I grew up Church of England, I was exposed to lots of different flavors of Christianity. Stuff that was more, you could say, hysterical. It's like Pentecostalism, the Pentecostals, Baptist stuff that's really, really hysterical. And that was difficult. And then I eventually, so yeah, it was very much a thing of, do I have to choose between my faith or getting better? Well, actually, sorry, God, but I kind of want to get better. So in this time, I was in and out of hospitals and care homes. And then I was bedridden again, living in a care home. Also in this time, my own mental health had collapsed as well, which is inevitable if you think about it. When your body collapses, your mind's going to collapse as well. And again, really difficult time. But you could say that was when I kind of hit rock bottom. And I think when you're at that place of rock bottom, the only way is up. And there's another expression of like the dark night of the soul, when you're in a really, really, really dark place. And at some point, somewhere, there comes this something, this inner voice, this something comes up. And that's the only way I can describe it, something within me. And I was at this time, I was living in a care home in East London, completely confined to a bed. I was having carers come in twice a day to help me with personal hygiene. Like people don't always believe it when I say I was confined to a bed for about 4 years in total. So I had to have personal carers. It's still difficult. And there was something within me that was very much, I'm not staying here. I'm not going to be bedridden. Whereas I say this sounds kind of heavy, especially when I'm talking about sex and sexuality, but it does loop back. And so that was when I kind of got very serious about, I don't like the term researching now, especially in light of the pandemic, but I had a laptop. I had all the time in the world. I could Google everything. I was very determined. I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to, being confined to a bed is not my life. This ain't it. And it was also at this time that I was really considering breaking up with my faith, because I realized it was harming me in so many ways, especially when, so in all of this time, being in hospital, care homes, I was having a lot of therapy, different kinds of therapy, like CBTs, counseling. And I feel like a lot of the nub and gist of a lot of this therapy was very much love yourself, trust yourself. And yet the Christianity that I was being exposed to, that some of my friends were talking about, was you can't trust yourself. You are a worthless worm. You are nothing without God. You are nothing without Jesus. Don't trust your emotions. Don't trust your heart. Only trust God. And there's me like, which one do I do? No offense, God, but I value my own health. I value my own recovery over whatever faith this is. This ain't working. So I chose my health. I chose my body. And it was actually at that time that the leader of my school Christian group who came to pray with me. And it was then that I felt the peace to say, you know what, me and Christianity, we're going to take a break, just a break. I'm not breaking up. We're on a break. And so it was in that time that I decided to Google everything that I was told was the devil. And I went down the Google rabbit hole. Yeah, and it's interesting because this also loops into why I get really frustrated at conspiracy theories, and that because it's like, I did that, I've been there, done that. I went down the Google rabbit hole. I went fully down into conspiracy theories. Oh yeah, I was, you name it, I was probably into it. And apparently it's a really common trajectory that when people leave either Christianity or any kind of like big religion or maybe a high demand group, they kind of swing to the other side of the pendulum. So I kind of did that. And that was a really interesting time because I was still confined to a bed. And I started to explore things like energy healing, like Reiki, like angels. I got into Doreen Virtue, which is hilarious considering she's now completely abandoned the New Age and she's gone into Christianity, but full hardcore Christianity, where she's basically said, all of my previous teachings were demonic, they were demons. Hilarious. And it was in this time of me starting to heal that I was thinking, well, yeah, so I've always been really horny, but I wasn't allowed to explore it. And now I'm not in this like belief system anymore where like sex is a sin. Ooh, sex. Oh, because one thing I haven't covered in all of this was that when I was confined to a bed for a very long time, my one comfort, because I was in bed 24/7, I started to allow myself to have sexual fantasies. And I made this bargain with God. And I said, look, God, I don't think you're going to begrudge me having these sexual fantasies because look, I'm confined to a bed. I think you're going to be okay with that. No offense, mate. And so I was having all of these wild fantasies, allowing myself to. So I knew I didn't want to be a Christian anymore. I knew I didn't believe a lot of this stuff anymore. It's like, oh, I could start to explore sex now. Except all of those hang-ups, all of that shame was still there. So when at this time I was still living in this care home in East London, mental health care home. And from time to time, like there was two blokes there who'd borrow my laptop to watch porn on, and they'd give it back to me and they hadn't bothered to close the windows. And like, I remember the first time I saw like a porn video, and this was by accident, my first feeling was, and then, oh, actually a little bit aroused by this. Oh, no, I shouldn't, no, this is bad, this is wrong. Porn is bad, porn is wrong. Oh, no. Ooh, I'm a little bit aroused by this. So that was when it kind of started. I started to have boyfriends in the care home. That's a whole other story. And to cut this story short, because I'm going on a lot, my health started to build up again. I moved down to Eastbourne to a mental health care home in Eastbourne, built my health up, built a lot of my life back. And there's so many tangents I could go down with this. But in essence, it was building my health up again and growing up. Because so much of my late teens and early 20s, or my teens basically, I missed that emotional, psychological development milestone. I'm just adjusting myself here because I tend to fidget. And that meant I had a lot of catching up to do emotionally. And that meant that I had to learn how to do things. Well, first of all, going to nightclubs and pubs for the first time, mind blown. But then it was the whole thing of falling in and out of love with and getting infatuated with various men, most of whom were not appropriate. And what was difficult was because I was very, very much into New Age spirituality then. I was fully in the woo. I was immersed in the woo. Angels, goddesses, Tantra also, which was kind of my gateway drug. And I very much got hung up on the whole thing of like conscious relationships and twin flames and soulmates. And yeah, that really fucked me up big time as well, because then I was shooting myself and feeling really guilty. And this is when I started to become sexually active. And by that, I mean having partner sex with men. That was there was a lot to learn. And what was difficult was that I still had and have friends who are Christian. And there was very much this feeling of doing this, you're going to break your heart. And the hard thing was, in many ways, I did. In many ways, falling in and out of love with, becoming infatuated with, because it was infatuation that I got with various men, or pushing away the men that were really good for me, because I didn't feel we were soulmates. I didn't feel we were twin flames again. And it's hard. I don't want to say that these friends were right, because a lot of the Christian, the church, the purity culture message around sexuality was you develop soul ties. Every time you have sex with someone, i.e. penis and vagina, every time a man's penis is inside you, you're going to develop a soul tie. And how much of that was a hangover? Because like whenever I've worked with people who come from Christianity and purity culture has really fucked them up, they know that even if they don't consciously believe this stuff, it still lives on emotionally, subconsciously in the body. So how much of this falling in, like having sex with men that were not appropriate, when I think back now, how much of that was a hangover? And that was very confusing. It was really difficult for me to figure out. And I was still in my early 20s. And psychologically, I was probably still a teenager. And that was very difficult. And at this time, I started to explore Tantra and sacred sexuality. That was my gateway. That was my bridge. I'm aware of time. I'm aware this is going on a long time, because this is a long story. And for me to try and condense it is very difficult. So I'm going to try and, let's not do that. Just think, nope, okay, fine. I need to try and condense this. Is really hard, especially to try and condense a lot of the nuggets. But I will say, and even though I have a lot of criticism of a lot of the world of Tantra and sacred sexuality now, there's so much of it that I love, and that absolutely saved me, in that I remember the first time I was at a conscious sexuality retreat and I was doing an exercise nude with a lot of sexual energy around. I remember this was the first time I felt so free in my body. And whenever I do exercises from Tantra or Neo Tantra with my clients, it's a similar feeling of, I did not know this body existed. Like, even though I've always known I have a body, I didn't know I could feel like this, so in my body, so embracing my every single part of my naked body. And exploring Tantra and sacred sexuality and getting into all of that was a way, it was like a door was opened. Because after I left Christianity, there was still this big feeling of guilt, a feeling of shame, that even though I didn't believe in all of this stuff anymore, I'm still a very spiritual woman. I've always been spiritual. I've always had a spiritual connection. And I felt this sadness that I couldn't see how to marry them up. There was very much this feeling of having to keep my sexual part hidden. And then when I learned about Tantra, Neo Tantra, and sacred sexuality, it was this radical notion that I can link my spirituality and my sexuality. Mind blown. Mind blown. Oh my God. Absolute mind blown. Body blown. And that's been a part of it ever since. Yeah. It's interesting because when I was preparing to do this recording, live stream, I did not have many points planned. I didn't want it to be like kind of bulletproof bullet points. Like, in 2007, I did this. And then in 2018, I wanted it to flow. And I'm mindful that this is taking up much more time than I intended to take up. And it's a lot for me to digest, as I'm saying there's not anybody else to watch or listen to. So I'm going to break this up. I'm going to put a pin in this now. I'm going to do the next one in the next few days. So there will be a part two. And I guess a spoiler alert, that will be much more around exploring different getting into sacred sexuality, healing, doing so much releasing around sexual shame, coming alive, feeling at home in my body, deciding to train as a sex coach because I was very much in this mindset. I guess I've always been like this, of like, if I want to do it, I'll just do it. Why not? Who says I can't train as a sex coach? Why not? That's what I did. And then, more spoiler alerts, getting really into embodiment work and then nervous system healing work, which loops in again to why my path in sexual healing and sexual liberation has been intimately tied in with my body, with health, with healing, and why so much of the body of work that I have created and walked is very much body oriented, body first, while also shamelessly celebrating sexuality. So if you're watching this on the recording, listening to this, do tell me your takeaways. And I was sharing this to give you some insight into maybe some of the background behind the Shameless Woman immersion and how it became what it is. So I'm going to stop here. Have a lovely evening, rest of the day, whatever. And we will check in soon. Oh, I'm smiling like that. Okay, I'm going to stop this on Instagram now. It's recording. It's